Photographic history was made recently when William Koch of Florida, a noted collector, paid $2.3 million for a tintype at auction in Denver, Colorado. The most interesting thing about this is that the tintype is now the most valuable original photograph in the world. There are 3 other photographs that sold for more money than what Mr. Koch paid for his tintype, but they're art pictures. And a tintype is the actual film, so to speak, that was in the camera when the image was taken. The other 3 that are more valuable were just prints. Now the tintype that Mr. Koch bought is the famous image of William Bonney, Henry Antrim, otherwise known as Billy the Kid. Just 2 inches by 3 inches in size, it's now the most valuable and most historic photograph of an individual in history. Billy the Kid's name, even though he was shot dead by Pat Garrett in July of 1881, still resonates through the history books, popular culture of today. In fact, there have been no less than 21 movies made on the life of Billy the Kid, which is somewhat of a coincidence at this point in time, because the kid was 21 when he died, and they said he had taken 21 lives. 1 life for each year of his life by the time he was gunned down himself. Pete Maxwell's house, Fort Sumner, New Mexico. The image that the entire world's been familiar with of Billy the Kid for the last 110 years or so has been the one that appeared in Pat Garrett's book, published just months after he killed Billy the Kid in Fort Sumner. There was a woodcut engraving of the kid that Pat put in the book. Now, the woodcut is obviously taken from the original tintype that Mr. Koch bought recently at auction. Now, back in the 1880s, you couldn't just print a photograph in newspapers. There was no process to do that yet. You had to do a woodcut or a lithograph and have that image transferred into the print. Somewhat like the Wall Street Journal used to do with portraits on the cover of its daily issue up until recently. With that woodcut of Billy the Kid that appeared in Pat Garrett's book, for many years, that was the only image, and all other images of Billy the Kid came from that original woodcut. It wasn't until 1907 that an actual copy of the original photograph was published in a book. It was published in the History of New Mexico in 1907, and it was not the exact same photograph that Mr. Koch bought recently at auction. In fact, this was one of 2 images that were taken at the exact same time on 1 sheet of tin, and then with a pair of snips were cut in half. Billy gave one to a girlfriend and the other one to a friend of his, Dan Dedrick, another outlaw. Now, the Dedrick picture was kept by Dedrick and his relatives, the Uphams, and it wasn't known to historians until the mid-1980s when they displayed it at the Lincoln County Historical Society Museum in New Mexico. That's the image that was sold on Saturday. The one that the girlfriend had, the one that was published in the book in 1907 and became the basis for so many myths about Billy the Kid, that was lost in a house fire and hasn't been seen nor heard from since. Now, when I tell you about myths about Billy the Kid, we've blown up the original print here, and you can see that Billy's holding a Winchester rifle, and he's got a revolver on his left hip. Well, that gave rise to the familiar myth that Billy the Kid was the left-handed gun. In fact, a stage version of that, written by Gore Vidal, was turned into a film in 1958 starring Paul Newman, entitled The Left-Handed Gun. But the thing about it is if you look at the picture, you'll see that the rifle is in this configuration, but a close-up of the photograph shows the loading gate is here on the left side. Well, that's not really the way any Winchester was made, especially model 1873s. The loading gate is on the right side of the gun. You might ask, how does that happen? Well, this is a tintype. It's a piece of metal coated with the emulsion that is wet when the cameraman takes the lens cap off and exposes the plate to the light that's in front of him. In this case, young William Bonney. standing in front of a saloon in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. It's a reverse image. The prismatic effect of the lens flips the image onto the tin and you get a reverse. So when we flip the image right, orient it correctly, you can see very clearly that Billy's holding an 1873 Winchester with the loading gate on the correct side of the gun, and his revolver in what looks to me to be a cut down U.S. military flap holster is on his right hip. So there we have the story of Billy the Kid and his famous photograph, the story of how he became known as the left-handed gun, and the story of now the world's most valuable and certainly the most historic photograph in history.